After being reborn, I finally decided to let Willow go. She wanted to dedicate herself to research, so I retreated to the mountains to teach. She was attached to her assistant, so I simply called off the engagement. In my past life, I trapped her with family and responsibility. She spent a lifetime as Makoto's mistress, never having a legitimate relationship. But when I fell ill and passed away, I realized that I too had lost an entire life. Chapter 1. After being reborn, I finally decided to let Willow go. She wants to dedicate herself to scientific research, so I'll head into the mountains to teach. She's attached to that little assistant of hers, so I'll just cancel the engagement. In my past life, I trapped her with family and responsibility. She spent a lifetime with Makoto as an illegitimate lover, but it was only when I fell ill and passed away that I realized I had lost my whole life too. After being reborn, the first thing I did was sign up for the teaching program in the mountains. When I saw the transfer notice, I felt like I was in a different world. The leader, who had always advised me, said with a satisfied smile, "Of all the new teachers, you were the one I was most hopeful about. Before, you said your fiancé worked in Beijing and wasn't willing to leave, but now you've finally made up your mind." Speaking of Willow, she was a proud daughter of heaven. Not only did she come from a good family, but her career was also bright. She was a key talent being nurtured by the research institute, and her career was on the rise. As for me, I had a stable job, but nothing else stood out. If it weren't for the childhood engagement we had, there was no way she and I could have ended up together. I looked at him firmly and said, "Leader, I want to try doing something meaningful." He patted me on the shoulder and said, "The place where you'll be teaching is tough. You need to be mentally prepared. No matter how hard it is, it can't be worse than the last life." In my past life, I couldn't make up my mind in time, and I never went to teach in the mountains. That became my lifelong regret. The Liu family was pushing us to marry. Less than a month after the wedding, Willow was pregnant. She didn't want to have the child, saying her research project was at a critical stage, and having a baby would affect her progress. But I was so desperate to have a complete family that I took over all the household responsibilities. From then on, I was trapped in the mundane matters of family life. Willow thought it was only natural and rarely returned to our home. She was busy with experiments and publishing papers. As her project progressed, her achievements became more remarkable, and soon she was traveling around the country collecting data. But no matter where she went, Makoto always accompanied her as her assistant. He took care of both her work and personal life. Meanwhile, I was stuck at the Liu family's house, raising children and caring for the elderly. I raised our son by myself and always thought he respected me as his father, until I saw that he was engaged to Makoto's niece. In the private room, he smiled broadly and called out to Makoto without hesitation, "Dad, would you like some tea?" It was only when the wedding was nearing that he informed me. I confronted him, and he responded dismissively, "Dad, my mom and Mr. Ito work is monumental and important. You're not pursuing any progress yourself, so stop dragging them down." He also said, "You can't be so greedy. They've given you the title of father, but you want my mom's heart too, with your education. Do you even have anything in common with her?" He thought it was only Willow who was trapped by the family, and I, in his eyes, was the unfortunate victim of marriage life. But why should it be that way? When we were young, I asked her what she wanted, and she agreed to the marriage arranged by our elders. Because of that, I gave up the career I truly wanted to pursue. Her research tasks were tough, but I too worked tirelessly taking care of the family. While she was away on business trips, I handled all the meals and needs of everyone at home. In the hardest times, I ran back and forth between my family and the school, 24 hours a day, non-stop. I was the one arranging doctor visits, buying medicine, paying bills. By the time she reached retirement age, she had climbed the ranks and become a leader in the research field. Meanwhile, I was stuck in the small plot of land at the school, seeing fewer and fewer things. At this point, everyone was saying I wasn't good enough for her. Everyone urged me to leave with dignity, and even our son, whom I raised single-handedly, thought Makoto should be standing by her side instead of me. But I refused. After our last argument, he abandoned me in the nursing home and walked away. At the end of my life, no one was at my bedside. I regretted it deeply. If I were to be born again, I would absolutely never give up on my own life again. Chapter 2. Back at the apartment, I gently put away the admission letter. A honey cake gradually took shape under my hands. This was the Liu family's house. It was convenient for me to work, and Willow and I lived here together. The large red circle on the living room calendar boldly announced, "In 2 weeks, I could leave here and finally live the life I had always wanted." Just as I finished drawing the red circle, Willow returned with Makoto and his niece. When they saw me opening the door, Makoto gave what seemed like a cheerful smile and said, "George, Willow asked me to come up for a visit. I'm causing you trouble again." The little girl, familiar with the house, sniffed the sweet scent and rushed into the kitchen to grab some dessert from the baking tray. She divided it into 3 portions, one for each of them. They were happily sharing it, but they forgot mine. When I walked out of the kitchen, the 3 of them were huddled together, chatting and laughing. The moment the cake entered their mouths, all 3 of them immediately spat it out. "Uncle, it's so bitter." I stood still, unmoving, while Willow ran around, offering tissues and tea. In the end, Makoto forced a smile as he left the house. His usual dimples were nowhere to be seen this time, but he still spoke with an overly tolerant tone. "Willow, George's skills have room for improvement. You two mustn't argue over this." Willow didn't say anything as she sent him out the door. When she came back, I quietly placed another plate of cake in front of me and began to enjoy it in silence. Willow seemed like she wanted to say something but then hesitated. Finally, she explained, "Emma is my sister's orphan child. Before she passed away, she kept asking me to take care of Makoto. The reason I let the child try your desserts is because you're good at making them." I still didn't speak. She sighed and muttered, "If you mind so much, I'll stop bringing them over in the future." The next day, I got up early to pack my bags, preparing to go to the nearby city in a couple of days. Since I had already decided to break off the engagement, it was better to make things clear sooner rather than later. It was out of respect and also to avoid any further entanglements. As I was packing, I came across a little clay doll. It was a gift from Willow when we were kids. Back then, she was so determined, her chubby hands covered in mud as she said, "George, my mom said you'll be my husband when you grow up, so I'm giving this to you." The doll was eventually packed into my suitcase. I didn't want the doll anymore, and I didn't want her either. I stood up and drew a large X on the living room calendar. In 14 days, I would leave here. Chapter 3. That night, Willow came back very late. She glanced at the dishes on the table and casually said, "I've eaten out." A woman who sneaks food doesn't even bother wiping the corners of her mouth clean. After what happened last time, she knew that bringing Makoto home would just make me angry. So she simply ate outside. At least I hadn't made her any food. After dinner, I returned to my room to start organizing materials and make the final preparations before school began. Willow silently appeared behind me. I closed my laptop and asked, "What's wrong?" She was silent for a while before speaking. "The wedding planner and the hotel contacted me. Can we set the date for September 1st? She really knew how to pick a date, perfectly timed with the day I would be starting school. I looked up at Willow. 3 seconds later, she silently avoided my gaze. In my past life, she dealt with our relationship the way she handled work matters, love, marriage, children, and family care. To outsiders, she seemed to be doing everything perfectly, but only I could sense her distance and indifference. It wasn't until I was about to die that I finally realized she was probably unhappy with this marriage from the very beginning. But in the end, I was the only one who withered in this marriage. So, I asked her, "Willow, have you thought it through?" She froze for a moment, clearly not expecting me to ask such a question. Then I heard the exact same answer I had received in the past life. She said, "George, you're the only man I've ever considered my husband." This time, I didn't hesitate. I said, "Marriage is a big deal. We should discuss it with our parents. The date can wait. Let's give it more time." She seemed relieved and quickly changed the topic with a smile. "It's so late, and you're still preparing lesson plans. Don't tire yourself out." Those lesson plans were for the children in the mountain village. In this life, I was going to choose the road I hadn't chosen before. I wanted to see how wonderful George could live without Willow. The next morning, Willow woke up early. When I got up, there was a bowl of crab roe wontons from South City on the table. It was my favorite. She was rarely so considerate. I silently waited for her to make her move. Sure enough, Willow hesitated before speaking. "George, I can't go with you to your parents' place this time. Emma's sick, and Makoto can't handle it alone." That was exactly the excuse I needed to keep her from following me back. It worked out perfectly for both of us. When she saw that I nodded in agreement, Willow hurriedly rushed out the door. I glanced at the calendar on the wall. There were still 13 days left. I was going home today, to break off the engagement. The Liu family had always been kind to me, but it wouldn't be difficult to end the engagement. I just had to tell them that Willow had a bright future ahead of her, and she was about to soar to greater heights. As for me and her, we were no longer a match. The Liu family's living room was quiet and heavy. I sat silently to the side, slowly turning my teacup. Mrs. Liu tried to speak several times but swallowed her words each time. Over the years, she had heard a lot about Makoto. After a long pause, she finally said, "Even if she has feelings for Makoto, you two are still engaged. If she dares to go back on her word, I'll handle it." It was Mr. Liu who decisively spoke. "Since you've chosen to break off the engagement, we respect your decision. However, George, our relationship won't change. We will always regard you as one of our closest juniors." Willow was now the apple of everyone's eye. So even her own parents couldn't understand why I was so determined to break off the engagement. But I understood. For this marriage, They probably had some hidden hopes and expectations too. Now that I was taking the initiative to end it, I was showing my awareness of the situation. This was a good thing. From now on, I would have no more entanglements with Willow or the Liu family. In the end, they were the true family. Chapter 4. The engagement was called off. To prevent any complications, I lied to them, saying Willow was too busy and that she asked me to come back alone. After hearing this, Mrs. Liu genuinely seemed a bit guilty. She urged me to stay at their house for a while longer. I didn't mind. I didn't want to go back to that small apartment and face Willow day in and day out. I stayed at the Liu family's house for 10 days. During those 10 days, Willow only called once. After hearing that I was at the Liu's, she didn't call again. She was still the same as before. When it came to our relationship, she always maintained a businesslike attitude. She wouldn't show concern, nor would she let her guard down. When I returned, I immediately marked 10 large red crosses on the calendar. Only 4 days left. Just 4 more days. I picked up my luggage to go home, but I heard the sound of the door opening. Willow was standing outside, followed closely by Makoto and Emma. When Willow saw me, she seemed a bit surprised and asked, "You're back?" Makoto and Emma, both casually, turned and entered my room. I frowned as I watched him shut the door to my room without hesitation. The living room was a mess, and upon closer inspection, all of my things were scattered around. I looked at Willow. A hint of embarrassment flashed across her face as she explained, "Well, Makoto's house had a leak after the heavy rain the other day, so they're temporarily staying here for a couple of days. I saw you weren't here, and since there weren't too many things, I let him stay in your room for now." I hadn't even told her about the broken engagement yet, and still, she and Makoto acted without any hesitation. When Willow met my cold, distant gaze, she offered, "You can move into my room for now and sleep in my bed." Willow said this while opening her bedroom door. "By the way," she added, "where are your books? There's hardly anything left in your room." Of course, I had moved them out. However, I explained calmly, I sold them. After we get married, I plan to focus more on the family, so many of these things won't be necessary. Willow frowned. "Even if you're married, some of these things could still be useful. Self-improvement is important at any stage. But never mind. If you want to sell them, then do it." She always knew everything, but she didn't care. She watched me get swallowed by that family. As the beneficiary, Willow seemed perfectly at ease, but she shouldn't have been. Enjoying my sacrifices while being infatuated with Makoto, it wasn't right. I pursed my lips and didn't say anything. Seeing my silence, she finally spoke again. "By the way, what did your parents say?" Willow took the bag from my hand. I paused for a moment before answering. "I had someone check the date, and it's not a good one. We can talk about it later." There were still 4 days. I'd use this excuse to buy some time. Once I left, I'd explain everything to her clearly. Willow sighed in relief, then forced a smile to cover up her emotions. She looked at the calendar in the living room and said, "Looks like we'll have to pick a new good date." After that, she hurried off to the kitchen to cook. She didn't even notice what I had drawn on the calendar. I looked at the household registration book on my desk by the window. It was Willow's. Just as I was about to get up and help, I heard the faint sound of 3 people chatting outside. The man's voice was deep, the woman's was sweet, and the child's was adorable. I quietly sat back down. At this point, even though I had broken off the engagement with her, staying under the same roof with her was inappropriate, let alone sharing the same room. But with just 4 days left, I wouldn't be able to find a suitable place to rent in time. After thinking about it, I figured I would eat, then sleep on the floor in the living room before bed. Chapter 5. The next morning, before I had even fully woken up, Emma was already making a ruckus in the living room. Makoto didn't bother with her and continued to clatter away in the kitchen. Willow, on the other hand, just sat on the sofa, smiling as she watched the two of them. Perhaps this was the image of a perfect family in her mind. I used the excuse of needing to buy groceries and hurried out the door. Once outside, I took a deep breath. Neighbor Hongjie saw me and quickly approached, asking, "George, you're back. I thought you went to visit your in-laws." Her words carried a hint of playful teasing. I replied, "Not my in-laws." Neighbor Hongjie froze for a moment, then laughed, thinking I was just being considerate of Willow's reputation. She continued, "Right, not your in-laws yet. You'll have to wait until you're actually married to change how you address them." Noticing the change in my expression, Hongjie stopped talking, clearly feeling hesitant, but she couldn't hold it in. She quietly scolded me. "While you were away these last few days, little Lou brought men home. I asked her about it, and she actually said you were okay with it. That man looks trouble. How could you give your approval? You're not even married yet." "Come on, George, open your eyes. Willow has everything going for her. If it weren't for your engagement, I'd be considering introducing her to my nephew. Who wouldn't be attracted to her? She's got one man after another chasing her. You better be careful. Even with all these men around her, Willow was only truly standing by Makoto's side. Makoto didn't need to worry. Willow would give him all the confidence he needed. What surprised me was that Willow had told others it was my decision, as if she were trying to avoid any blame falling on Makoto. She truly thought through everything, but there were some things I couldn't say yet. Seeing that I was silent, Hongjia, noticing my soft nature, clicked her tongue and gave me one last piece of advice to keep an eye out while staying at home. When I returned, the living room was empty. However, there were rustling noises coming from the basement. After a while, Emma bounced upstairs, holding a piece of torn, old paper. I looked closely. It was the portrait I had drawn of Willow last New Year's Eve. The woman in the drawing still had a cold expression, but her lips were curved in a faint, gentle smile. The room looked warm and spring-like, and outside, the fireworks were brilliant. In that moment, Willow's eyes were focused solely on me. At the time, I believed that our married life would be filled with such simple, happy moments, repeated for many years, but I never expected that would be the only time she ever truly looked at me. The paper Emma was holding was already torn and dirty. It was covered with sticky sugar stains. Makoto appeared behind her. He quickly said, "She's just a child. George, you won't hold it against her, right?" Though his tone was gentle, the smugness and disdain in his eyes were unmistakable. I replied coldly, "If you know she's misbehaving, then teach her properly." Makoto seemed taken aback by my response. Children are the best at reading the atmosphere, and Emma immediately charged at me. Her dirty little hand slapped across my shirt, leaving a dark handprint on the fabric. She yelled, "You're not allowed to bully my uncle." Her voice was sharp and piercing. Willow rushed in from outside and immediately pulled Emma into her arms. I didn't look at her. My gaze was fixed on the fallen piece of paper. Willow, following my line of sight, froze for a moment, clearly understanding something. She opened her mouth to say something but swallowed her words. Makoto, clearly pleased with the situation, wore an expression of false innocence. He quickly added, "Willow, I'm sorry. It's all my fault for not watching Emma closely." I suddenly let out a laugh. All three of them turned to look at me. I picked up the torn drawing and held it up to the light. I said, "I didn't draw it right back then. The lighting in the room wasn't this bright." After that, I tossed the drawing into the trash can, expressionless, and walked into the kitchen. Behind me, Willow sharply raised her head and stared at my retreating back in a daze. Chapter 6. I couldn't care less that Emma was still crying and throwing a tantrum. Willow followed me into the kitchen. She hesitated for a long time before finally awkwardly speaking up. "I've been looking for a new place these last few days. Makoto and Emma will be moving out in a couple of days. I know you don't like him, but can you just bear with it a little longer?" Without even thinking, I nodded. Sure. Anyway, there were only 3 days left before I would leave. It was originally Lou's house. How they were going to lock themselves in and live here afterward had nothing to do with me. I agreed too quickly, and Willow seemed to choke on her words. Her face turned an unhealthy shade of green and white, looking rather unpleasant. She probably thought I was angry about what had just happened. She sighed and pulled me back. "Emma is just a child. I've told you so many times. I'm only taking care of them because I promised my sister. Makoto's not doing well either. Can you stop thinking so badly of him?" I sneered. "So, you bring him back and say it's my decision." Willow gasped, opened her mouth to say something, but couldn't get a word out. I laughed. See, no matter how noble her words sounded, her inner turmoil and ugly thoughts couldn't deceive herself. Out of respect for our parents, I didn't want to destroy her career, but that was all I could do for now. The next morning, I woke up early. The scene with Emma yesterday reminded me of something. There were still some of my things in the basement. Taking advantage of the fact that they weren't awake yet, I went downstairs to collect my things. I had lived in this house for several years. Despite starting to pack up more than 10 days in advance, there were still many things left behind. I packed carefully. For the rest of my life, I didn't want any further connection with Willow. Since I had decided to leave, I wanted to do so completely. After gathering everything, I had 3 big bags full. When I opened the door, I saw that Willow had already made breakfast. When she saw the things I was holding, she froze for a moment. "Where are you taking all these things?" she asked. I replied calmly, "Throwing them out. There's too much useless stuff." Willow took a quick glance before looking away. She then turned and knocked on the door of the room next door. "Makoto, get up and bring Emma. Breakfast is ready." At the dining table, as soon as Emma saw me, she hummed in displeasure and scooted her breakfast closer to herself and Makoto. Willow, holding a fried egg, came out and, seeing me, smiled. "You're up? Come on." I made fried eggs. When she turned and saw what was in front of Emma and Makoto, she awkwardly smiled and said, "Good girl, Emma, can you share some with Uncle Wong?" I ignored them and walked straight out of the house. There were only a few days left before the school year started. The necessary paperwork had already been taken care of. I planned to go buy more books and stationery to donate to the children in the mountains. Also, I needed to buy a few more things. Once everything was finished, I booked a room at a hotel. Even though there were only 2 days left, staying under the same roof with Willow, where we were constantly bumping into each other, was just unbearable. Since she thought I was jealous of Makoto, let her think so. It was a perfect excuse for me to move out. Everything was ready, and I returned home. But to my surprise, I saw that Emma was playing with my lesson plan. My mind went blank, and I shouted, "What are you doing?" I grabbed my passport back, and Emma was startled, falling off the table. Her shrill cries immediately brought Makoto running from the other room. He shouted, "What are you doing? Who told you to bully Emma?" Makoto shoved me aside and, in a rush, scooped the child into his arms. I trembled with anger, carefully putting the passport into my bag. I demanded, "Bully her? You should take a look at what she did. Who told you to touch my things? Get out of here." Makoto stood up, still holding Emma, and coldly stared at me. He said, "Ha, you're not even married to Willow yet. You don't have the right to make the decisions here." He walked to the door with Emma in his arms, then paused and turned back. He added, "Even if you do marry her, you still won't be able to win against me." The door slammed shut behind him. Makoto's hostility always showed itself when Willow wasn't around. Chapter 7. In the past, I always retreated whenever I faced him. He followed Willow around, gradually becoming independent, and everyone said they made the perfect team. In contrast, I was just a stay-at-home husband. I seemed so much less significant, but as I got the chance to live this life again, I suddenly felt at peace. He may be excellent, but I have my own light to shine. Why should Makoto and I be placed on opposite ends of a scale? Because of Willow. She's not worth it. Is there nothing else in my life apart from Willow? I can go teach in the mountains, bring new knowledge to the children there. I can contribute to the cause of education. Though small, it is meaningful. I can go out and broaden my horizons, gain experience. The mud here will only hinder my steps. As for Makoto, when I first came back, I had thought about getting revenge on him. In my previous life, he ruined my marriage. I thought about causing a scene at his workplace, or exposing him online, but what would that accomplish? As long as Willow wants, she has 100 ways to continue taking care of Makoto. Besides, if Willow wasn't moved, even if Makoto stood in front of her naked, she wouldn't look at him. Why bother? It's just a love gone wrong. I don't want to waste my life dealing with it anymore. So, I said to Makoto seriously, "Listen, no matter what your relationship with Willow is, whether you admit it or not, it's none of my business. I'm not marrying her. If you understand, you should focus more on Willow, not provoke me. Otherwise, I might change my mind at any time." Makoto froze. He waved his hand as if to deny it, but then seemed afraid to really anger me. Finally, he hesitated and went back to his room. I finished packing my things and took one last look at the apartment. Looking around, I could see the traces of other men who had lived here. There was nothing worth missing. I turned and walked out. Back at the hotel, I quickly packed my things and started typing a message to Willow. Though she had treated me poorly in many ways, up until now in this life, we didn't have any major grudges. In the past life, we had both wasted each other's time and ended up in confusion. If possible, I still wanted to clear things up in this life. In the message, I didn't mention where I was going, but simply told her that I had made up my mind to go teach in the mountains. As for our engagement, she didn't want to marry me, and I didn't want to marry her either. We would call it off. From then on, we would go our separate ways. Before I could send the message, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Willow standing outside. She seemed out of breath, as if she had been running for a long time. I asked, "What are you doing here?" She gasped a few times before speaking. "Finally found you. I'm glad you're okay." "I'm glad you're okay." I fell silent, expecting her to start blaming me again. "Okay, don't be mad anymore. Come back with me," Willow said, squeezing past me and starting to pack up my things. I turned off my phone screen, hiding it behind my back, but her eyes shifted and landed on the large bags scattered across the floor. Willow's expression changed drastically. She asked, "Where are you going?" I was momentarily stunned, annoyed with myself for not packing things away properly. I quickly made up an excuse. This afternoon, Emma was rummaging through my stuff. I was worried she'd mess something up, so I brought it out. Seeing my calm demeanor, Willow sighed with relief. She said, "I've already scolded her. Don't argue with a child." I played along and stopped her from packing any further. Willow furrowed her brows and asked, "What's wrong? Are you still upset?" Emma was wrong, but she's just a kid. Don't make a fuss. I just don't understand. Emma's always been so well behaved. Why do you two always clash when you return? Willow seemed like she wanted to say something more, but when she saw me looking at her indifferently, she suddenly stopped talking. I asked her one question, Does Makoto know you came to find me? Willow looked embarrassed and annoyed. What's it got to do with him? Why are you always bringing up Makoto? I didn't answer, but continued. I guess he doesn't know, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be standing here. I'm your fiancé. If we had an argument, it's only natural for you to come find me. But why? Deep down, don't you want to tell him? Why do you always subconsciously avoid talking about me when you're around him? Every time we argue, you say it's because you're taking care of her for your sister's sake. You've got several sisters, so why does no one else matter as much as you do? Willow. I called her name softly. If you don't love me, just let me go. Willow's face turned pale, and it seemed like her body wavered slightly. After a long pause, she spoke with difficulty. Since you're not going back, then stay here and reflect on it. I'll come back to pick you up in a few days. Willow awkwardly turned and fled. I never meant to wrong you. I'll go back and prepare for the wedding. Hearing the hurried footsteps retreating, I expressionlessly shut the door. How laughable. It was as if, in her eyes, her willingness to prepare for the wedding and marry me was some great favor I should be eternally grateful for. Chapter 8. After Willow left, I bought my train ticket on my phone. Then I went out and had a meal with some colleagues I had been close with. We were all about to go our separate ways, and I didn't know when I'd be back, or what year it would be by then. During the meal, my closest classmate hesitated, as though he wanted to say something but wasn't sure. He knew a little about my situation with Willow. He said, George, didn't you say you were about to get married? Why are you going to teach in the mountains instead? Long-distance relationships are a challenge for many couples. I smiled and shook my head. We're not getting married anymore. Then I raised my glass. To put it bluntly, the world is so big, I want to see more of it. So, here's to youth, friendship, and to myself. When I got home, I took an early shower and went to bed. I thought it would be a restless night, tossing and turning, but surprisingly, I slept soundly through the night, only waking up at dawn. After I woke up, I headed straight for the train station. Just before getting on the train, I sent out the message I had been editing for a long time. As soon as I sent it, my phone started vibrating uncontrollably. I turned it off immediately. When the train started moving, I felt a lightness in my body. For a brief moment, I felt like I saw the version of myself from my previous life, saying, thank you. When the train arrived at the station and I finally stepped onto that vast and desolate land, I suddenly felt like crying. The step I couldn't take in my past life. It seemed so easy to take this time, as long as I wanted it. I collected myself and went to report to the school. In my previous life, I didn't achieve my dream. This time, I would treasure this opportunity. Apart from eating and sleeping, I spent every other moment either in class or preparing lesson plans. During this busy time, I received 3 calls from Willow. The first one came a month after school started. Willow, after much effort, finally got my number. When an unfamiliar number appeared on the screen, I had already guessed it was her. Her voice on the other end of the line was emotional. She said she didn't agree to the annulment of the engagement. She told me that in her heart, I would always be her husband. Half a minute later, I hung up the phone. The second call came 2 months later. In the midst of heavy snow, Willow's tired voice came through. She said she had arranged a house and job for Makoto and had made it clear to him that they would never see each other again. That day, I just listened quietly. Willow's final call came on Christmas Day, in the snowstorm. For the first time, I spoke. I said, Willow, the semester exams were just graded. The kids in my class did great. At the start of the semester, I was struggling, trying to adjust to the local dialect, while also giving lessons and doing home visits with each child. Things weren't going smoothly, and it felt like I kept running into dead ends. I don't know when I'll gain the trust of the parents. Willow listened attentively, breathing lightly on the other end of the line. Then I said, but you know, Willow, I'm happy here. I won't trap myself anymore. Suddenly, Willow's voice choked up. Her tired voice came through. But I miss you. You see, the subject of her sentence was still I. She never cared about the exit for my soul, even in this moment of reconciliation. After this call, I cried my heart out at the foot of the mountain. In my past life, no matter how hard it got, I had never shed a tear. I had been hysterical, angry, regretful, but I never cried. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to shed tears. After wiping away my tears, I threw myself into teaching even more. In my second year of teaching, the villagers started trusting me more and more. Wherever I went, they greeted me warmly. Although rural education still had a long way to go, I knew that if I kept walking down this path, many children would benefit. Every night, when I raised my head from the office desk and looked at the bright moon in the mountains, I felt an inexplicable strength supporting me. The feeling of striving for an ideal was so good. Later, I learned from my classmate that Willow had gotten married. Her partner was Makoto. When my classmate told me, he was careful, perhaps considering my feelings. He explained cautiously, I heard that Willow had been preparing a business trip to the place where you were teaching. When Makoto found out, he went there to cause a scene. I don't know what happened, but the next day, both of them woke up in the same bed. Willow refused to agree, but she was pregnant. I didn't respond. In this life, she still entered marriage for the sake of responsibility. The responsibility of a daughter, the responsibility of a mother, but never the responsibility of a wife. At the end of our conversation, my classmate sighed. When you left to teach, I thought you were losing Willow, but now, I realize that a man living his own life is what's truly wonderful. George, you've earned our admiration now. 5 years later, I finished my teaching mission. I had nurtured a large group of outstanding children. For an ideal, the road is long and difficult.